Have you ever wondered if we're truly the first ones? The first species to think, to build, to imagine stories that stretch beyond the stars? What if I told you that long before dinosaurs roamed this planet, before Earth's timeline even, included complex life, someone else may have already come and gone? And not just anyone, but someone who looked remarkably like us. This isn't the plot of a sci-fi thriller. This is a real mystery buried beneath Siberian ice, sealed in silence by a government afraid of what it uncovered. It was the autumn of 1969 in a remote Soviet village named Ryavchik, where life moved slowly, quietly. In that stillness, beneath over 70 meters of ancient coal, miners were simply doing their job, digging, hammering, extracting black gold from the earth. That morning began like any other, with the clinking of tools echoing in the tunnels and the faint smell of rock dust lingering in the air. But then one man's pickaxe hit something strange, unnatural. Not rock, not coal, but a smooth, cool surface shaped too perfectly to be an accident. Curious, he brushed away the debris and called over his co-workers. What they revealed together wasn't just odd, it was unthinkable. Hidden beneath the earth was a hollow chamber, cold and still, the air thick with an undefinable scent. Atahi. The center of the chamber rested a marble sarcophagus, nearly 3 meters long, its carvings more precise than anything human hands could produce under such conditions. In that moment, the miners stood in breathless silence. Some feared it was a grave, others whispered. It might be treasure or something far older, but no one dared leave it untouched. Without waiting for officials, they opened it. What they found defied every expectation. Inside the sarcophagus was a young woman, motionless, preserved and beautiful in a way no language could capture. Her skin was so white it made snow seem grey by comparison, and without a single wrinkle or blemish. Her hair was deep brown, falling gently across her shoulders. She looked not dead, but simply asleep. Enveloping her body was a glowing pink liquid, translucent and still, that shimmered under the miners' flashlights like something from another world. Her dress was delicate and nearly see-through, but it showed no sign of decay. There were no seams, no threads, just one continuous, flawless garment. But the most disturbing element was in her hand. A small black metallic box, smooth, compact, no markings, no switches, nothing identifiable. At the time, no one knew what to make of it. Years later, when smartphones emerged, people began to connect the dots. The object looked nearly identical in size and shape. This was 1969. The term smartphone didn't exist. And yet, there it was. The villagers called her Princess Tyissoon, inspired by the name of the district where she was found. No one knew her origins, but it was clear she wasn't an ordinary woman. She wasn't from the Soviet Union. She wasn't from any known historical period. She wasn't in any measurable way from this world as we understood it. Within days, the mine was swarmed. Soviet military helicopters arrived without warning. The village was cordoned off. Families were told to evacuate. Soldiers patrolled the perimeter. The mine was labeled biologically dangerous, though no explanation was given. The miners who had seen the body were interrogated, their words swallowed by government silence. What happened to them afterward is still debated. Some say they were relocated, others say they disappeared. But the most tragic turn came when they tried to extract the sarcophagus. It was too heavy to lift, far, too dense, especially with the liquid inside. So the scientists made a decision: remove the fluid first, transport the contents separately. And as the pink liquid was slowly drained away, something terrifying happened. Her perfect skin began to fade, its glow dimmed. It turned grey, then bluish, then lifeless. The vibrance that had stunned the miners vanished. She no longer looked immortal. She looked dead. Whatever that liquid was, it didn't just preserve her. It animated her, maintained something no earthly method could explain. The sarcophagus and the remaining fluid were moved to a secret facility in Novosk. The top scientists in the USSR were called to analyze the body, the liquid, and the marble casing. Radiocarbon dating failed. Their instruments couldn't read. A result: it was too far out of range. So they resorted to advanced techniques: geological core sampling, molecular resonance testing, isotope decay. The final results stunned them all. The geological strata where the tomb had been found dated back 800 million years. That's nearly 4 times older than the first dinosaurs. In that period, life as we know it hadn't evolved past single-celled organisms. The idea of humans, or anything like them, existing then is not just implausible, it's impossible. And yet there she was, preserved, intelligent, human-shaped, beautiful, and buried in a mine millions of years before life was supposed to begin. That revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community, at least those who had the clearance to know. Was she proof of an ancient, forgotten civilization that lived and died before our recorded history even began? Or was she something else, something not of this earth? Those questions would only multiply in the years that followed, as strange events and terrifying coincidences began to plague the people who had first uncovered the tomb. But that is where the next chapter begins. But in the shadows of that scientific revelation, something far darker began to unfold. The sarcophagus had been moved, the liquid preserved in steel barrels, the body studied under top-secret classification. And yet, for the people of Rewritten, the miners who saw her with their own eyes, life would never return to normal. The man who first struck the stone with his pickaxe, the one who uncovered the edge of the tomb, was the first to die. Officially, it was a motorcycle accident. He had crashed into a truck late one night on a road he'd driven hundreds of times before. Authorities claimed he was drunk, but his family insisted otherwise. He was a quiet man, cautious by nature, and had never touched alcohol in years. What disturbed them more than the death itself were the weeks leading up to it. He had become restless, paranoid, waking in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, whispering about dreams of suffocation, of something cold staring back at him from the dark. His eyes, they said, never looked the same after he came back from the mine. Just a few weeks later, another miner disappeared. His body was found near a riverbank in the woods, curled up as if frozen to death. But the air wasn't cold. The day had been mild, almost warm for Siberia. Local whispers turned to panic. They called it a curse, the curse of the sarcophagus, and as the months passed, the tragedies multiplied. Accidents, illnesses, unexplained disappearances, and always, somehow, linked back to that one moment in 1969, when a group of men opened something that perhaps should have stayed sealed. By 1973, the Soviet government returned, this time not with scientists but with soldiers. Entire areas surrounding the old coal mine were cordoned off with military barricades. Forest paths were blocked by guards, watchtowers were erected, and every road into the tile district was monitored. What had once been a village of hard-working people became a border zone, a place locals were quietly warned never to enter again. No explanation was ever given, just silence, orders, and the overwhelming presence of secrecy. But behind that wall of silence, the investigation had not stopped. In fact, it had escalated. That same summer, deep within the newly restricted forest, Soviet special forces discovered 2 more sarcophagi buried near a glacial lake, just a few kilometers from the original mine. Both were identical in design, white marble, seamless seal, and inside the same strange pink liquid. And yes, more bodies, more princesses, or perhaps more accurately, more of whatever species she belonged to. These new discoveries were rushed away under cover of night. The scientists who examined them signed lifelong non-disclosure agreements. Some were reassigned to distant posts across the USSR. Others simply disappeared, vanished into bureaucratic fog. Entire documents were scrubbed, archive entries erased. It was as if the Soviet Union had decided not only to hide what they found, but to erase the very idea that it had ever existed. Yet fragments of the truth still escaped. Quiet testimonies, smuggled notes, whispers passed between retired geologists and frightened researchers, and what they described, if true, was beyond comprehension. Some believed the pink liquid was a form of ultra-advanced biological suspension, technology that allowed perfect cellular preservation, not just for decades, not just centuries, but possibly for millions of years. Think about that. Our best cryogenics today can barely preserve organs, but this fluid, whatever it was, kept entire bodies intact, skin flawless, hair undamaged, even down to the moisture in the eyes. Some even speculated it could preserve consciousness, though no one dared to test such a theory. Others leaned toward a theory even more radical, one that split the scientific team down ideological lines. They began to ask, was this the work of an ancient civilization on Earth, or were these beings not from Earth at all? One professor, anonymously cited in a lost journal entry, described the skin of the bodies as being so pale that it might represent an evolutionary adaptation to low-light conditions, perhaps a world far from a sun, a planet colder, dimmer, alien. That single sentence sparked what would later be called the Tyissoon hypothesis, the theory that the sarcophagus wasn't a tomb, but a cryogenic chamber. And its occupant? A traveler, a scout, an ambassador from another solar system, crash-landed on Earth millions of years ago. Some said her mission had failed, others said she had simply never awakened, and we had interfered too soon. While these ideas remained buried in classified files, they gained quiet traction in certain corners of academia, especially among proponents of the ancient astronaut theory, a controversial school of thought that suggests early human civilizations may have been shaped or even seeded by extraterrestrial visitors. And Princess Tyissoon? She became their symbol, their unspoken proof. But even among those who didn't buy the alien angle, the idea of a pre-human civilization on Earth was no less staggering. Imagine, for a moment, that humanity is not the first. That there was once a culture of intelligent beings, human or not, that built, explored, and perhaps even reached a level of technology we still can't replicate. A culture that lived not 10,000 years ago, but 800 million. And then vanished, without a trace, except for a few sarcophagi buried in frozen rock. What caused their extinction? A war? A natural catastrophe? Or maybe, just maybe, they chose to hide, to sleep, to wait. Today, near the original mine, the Soviet government has long since fallen. The region is open, though access to the forest remains curiously restricted. And near the place where it all began, someone has erected a small granite monument. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a single line etched in stone. In 1969, at this site, a young woman was discovered lying within a marble sarcophagus dated to hundreds of millions of years ago. No one claims responsibility for the marker, no agency, no museum, just a stone and a mystery. And if you ever find yourself standing before that quiet monument in the freezing wind of Siberia, you might ask yourself the same question the scientists once did. What else is buried beneath our feet, waiting to be found? And yet, as decades passed and the Cold War faded into memory, the silence around the Princess of Tyissoon only grew louder. It's strange how the more time passes, the more carefully certain stories are erased, not disproven, not refuted, just gently pushed out of reach. Official records were lost, files misplaced. The names of the scientists involved were either redacted or reassigned. The barrels of pink liquid never recovered. Even satellite scans of the area turned up anomalies, heat signatures where there should be permafrost, metallic echoes beneath layers of untouched earth. But nothing official, nothing confirmed. That's how real secrets survive. Not by denial, but by distraction. The few remaining Soviet documents that leaked over the years were incomplete, fragmented, sometimes no more than scribbled notes on the margins of a report. But they all shared one unsettling detail. None of the preserved bodies showed signs of decay, not after 800 million years. That alone makes the case an outlier in all of human discovery, because even the best preserved mummies on Earth, pharaohs, saints, icemen, have suffered time's toll. But this was preservation that mocked nature, that defied entropy, and it raised a terrifying question. What if this technology still exists somewhere, and we simply don't understand how to activate it? One geologist, now in his 90s, who worked on the second excavation, once confessed under anonymity, We weren't supposed to study her, we were supposed to forget her. That was the mission. Collect, contain, conceal. When asked if he believed she was human, he said nothing at first. Then he whispered, "No, but she wasn't alien either. She was something else. Something we don't have a word for." That statement has haunted me ever since, because it's easy to imagine extraterrestrials, greys, reptilians, interstellar travelers. But what's harder to face is the possibility that Earth had its own secret species, one that lived long before us, that looked like us, that may have even created the first sparks of what we now call civilization, and then disappeared, or worse, chose to go silent. That theory of a pre-human advanced civilization isn't just fringe thinking anymore. In fact, growing numbers of researchers across geology, archaeology, and even theoretical biology have begun to question why the fossil record has so many gaps. Why do extinction events seem to come in sudden waves, almost as if triggered? Why are there outlier artifacts, like the Baghdad battery, the Antikythera mechanism, and now perhaps the Princess of Tyissoon, that simply don't fit their assigned timelines? Maybe because the timeline itself is flawed. Some scholars, like Dr. Alan West in the 1980s, propose that Earth may have undergone memory resets, cataclysmic events so massive that they wiped out not just species, but entire records of history, ice ages, supervolcanoes, comet impacts, nuclear-scale eruptions of methane, events that could destroy everything except what lies buried deep beneath the Earth, like a sarcophagus, like a warning, like a clue. But then again, others argue that it wasn't a forgotten civilization, but visitors, that the sarcophagi found in Siberia are evidence not of our past, but of another planet's expedition. That Princess Tyissoon was part of a mission gone wrong, possibly an escape pod, a stasis chamber jettisoned from a failing starship. One that crash-landed here, hidden in the rock for eons. The pale skin, the strange fabric, the unknown metal, all point to something not of this Earth. The pink liquid, hair cryogenic preservative beyond human science. And if that's true, then she wasn't meant to stay asleep, she was meant to wake up. The question then becomes, what would have happened if she had? Would we have met a being of wisdom and peace, or something far less benevolent? Would she have explained the stars to us, or ruled over us as a forgotten god? It's the kind of question that haunts those who believe this wasn't just an anomaly, but an intersection, where ancient biology, forgotten technology, and cosmic accident briefly collided. But perhaps the most disturbing idea isn't whether she was human or alien, but that she was both. What if at some point in Earth's distant past humans didn't evolve alone? What if someone else helped us, nudged evolution forward, altered our DNA, left pieces of themselves behind? And Princess Tyissoon was a remnant of that interference, a hybrid, a prototype, not a person, but a message. And that's the thread that seems to tie everything together. The idea that we in the 21st century are not the beginning of the human story, but its continuation, a sequel to a forgotten age, the last chapter in a long, long book, a book whose first pages have been burned, buried, and deliberately hidden. And maybe that's why stories like this are so important, because even if they're half truth and half mystery, they force us to ask the questions our textbooks won't. They remind us that human history is not a straight line. It's a spiral, a pattern, rising, falling, rising again, and somewhere deep beneath our cities and oceans and forests, echoes of those older cycles still remain, waiting to be found, waiting to be remembered. Near the site of the original mine, the granite marker still stands, simple, silent, etched with only a few words. But now those words ring with deeper meaning. In 1969, at this site, a young woman was discovered lying within a marble sarcophagus dated to hundreds of millions of years ago. No context, no explanation, just a fact that doesn't fit. Her date that breaks everything we thought we knew, and a body that to this day no one has been able to disprove. So the next time you hear someone say we've uncovered all the secrets of history, ask them if they've heard of Princess Tyissoon. And if you've made it this far, then maybe you feel what I feel, that strange pull, that itch behind the eyes that whispers, there's more. There's always more. We just have to be willing to look where no one else dares to dig. And so we arrive at the question no one dares to answer out loud. If this discovery truly happened, if Princess Tyissoon was real, why hasn't the world heard more about her? Why is it that something so monumental, so profoundly disruptive to our understanding of history, remains confined to whispers, rumors, and fragments buried in forbidden archives? The answer isn't just politics. It isn't even fear. It's control, because history, as we've been taught it, isn't just a collection of facts. It's a carefully curated narrative. And when something comes along that threatens to rewrite everything, from evolution to the origin of civilization, it doesn't get celebrated. It gets buried, sealed beneath military orders, hidden behind disinformation, quietly erased from textbooks, classrooms, and search engines. And yet stories like this persist, not because they are sensational, but because they strike a nerve. Deep down, something inside us recognizes the truth, or at least the potential of it. That feeling, that strange tension between curiosity and dread, is what makes this story matter. So what are we left with? 3 sarcophagi, 3 preserved bodies, liquid that defies science, technology without origin, and a death toll of silence. That followed those who dared get too close. We don't have proof the way academia demands it, but we do have patterns, consistency, testimony, geological data, and a monument with no signature. And beyond that, we have questions. Questions that continue to haunt the scientific community, even if they're not allowed to admit it. Could there really have been a civilization hundreds of millions of years ago? One that achieved a level of technological and biological mastery beyond anything we've yet reached? Or was this some kind of celestial experiment, life seeded from another world, only to be wiped out before it could evolve? And perhaps most unsettling of all, was this just the beginning? Were the sarcophagi we found merely fragments of a much larger system, a network of deep-time vaults hidden across the globe, holding others like her in eternal stasis? You might think that's impossible, that we would have found more by now. But consider this: over 90% of the ocean floor remains unmapped, and vast swaths of Earth's crust have never been explored beyond a few hundred meters. In reality, we've only scratched the surface, quite literally. There could be dozens, maybe hundreds, of similar tombs lying silently beneath deserts, jungles and mountains, not because someone hid them, but because they've been waiting for time to pass, waiting for the right moment, waiting for us. And what if one day we open the wrong one? That's the dark side of discovery, the double-edged nature of knowledge, because not every door is meant to be opened. Not every secret wants to be known, and sometimes in our thirst to understand the past, we awaken something that should have remained undisturbed. But I believe there's another side to this story, a more hopeful one. Maybe these beings, whether ancient earthlings or interstellar travelers, weren't a threat. Maybe they were the guardians of a message, a signal, a warning, or a gift, something meant for us once we were ready to understand it. And maybe, just maybe, that time is approaching. You see, we're living through an era of rediscovery. Ancient structures are being reinterpreted, lost languages are being decoded, and the very foundations of archaeology and anthropology are shifting beneath our feet. The boundaries between science, mythology, and cosmology are starting to blur, and that's not a bad thing, it's growth. The more we accept that we don't know everything, the closer we come to real truth. So what can we take from the mystery of Princess Tyissoon? Perhaps it's this: that history is a mirror, but only when we're brave enough to look into the parts that aren't polished, the broken edges, the contradictions, the shadows. Because in those shadows, we don't just find the past. We find ourselves, and maybe that's what she was, a reflection of what we once were or what we might yet become. Today, her story lives on in whispers and digital corners of the internet. In grainy photographs, in anonymous interviews, in half-burned field notes. But it lives. And as long as people like you are still listening, watching, questioning, then it cannot be buried again. So if this story moved you, if it made you pause even for a moment, Don't keep it to yourself. Share it, talk about it, ask the questions no one once asked. Because in doing so, you're not just preserving a mystery, you're helping to unravel one. And as we close this chapter on the mystery of the Princess of Tyssel, remember, the greatest discoveries aren't always made in laboratories. Sometimes, they're found in the dirt, beneath old coal and ancient stone. And sometimes they're found inside us when we dare to imagine that the world is far older, far stranger, and far more wondrous than we've ever been told. Thanks for joining me on this journey. If you'd like to continue exploring these forgotten echoes of time, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Because together, we're not just telling stories, we're unearthing them. And somewhere deep beneath another forgotten mountain or forest, the next story is waiting.